I was born in Euro Lodge, Langbank in Renfrewshire at 04:30 a.m. on the 24th of November 1924. I was christened Robert Disher Whiteford and called Roy. I spent my first holiday in the summer of 1929 with my brother and my mother at Rose Cottage, Leverborough, Harris and the Outer Hebrides, where my grandfather and grandmother stayed. Later on that year, my grandmother died. The following year, we went back for the summer to the same place, to Harris, and stayed with my grandfather. My grandfather died soon after of a broken heart. At the age of 4, I started school in 1929 and had the same primary teacher until I was 11-year-old, Miss Orr. In the winter of 1930-31, my sister Molly, who worked in Glasgow, was in a bus accident at Langbank on the way to work in the morning. The compensation she received for this paid for a cruise that summer 1931. We went to the Mediterranean from Greenock and the SS Melita. The following winter, at the same place, another bus accident took us on a cruise on SS Moldavia to the Mediterranean, and the following year took us on the SS Strathair to the Canaries, and the following year again we went on the SS Montrose to the Mediterranean. My sister met Bill Hines on the SS Moldavia on the cruise, and they were later married in 1936 on the 11th of April and stayed in Ipswich. On the 31st of October 1937, Halloween, we moved from Euro Lodge, Langbank to Glen Clune in Glasgow, Port Glasgow, to be handier for school and work. I spent 3 years at Port Glasgow High School and did my 4th year at Greenock High School. I left school in the summer of 1940 and started work as shop boy with Kinnaird and Company, electrical contractors in Kelly Street in Greenock. When I was 16, the day I was 16, I started my apprenticeship as an electrician. I served my first 2 years apprenticeship with Kinnaird and Company, left and started my 3rd year with Scott and Company, Cartsburn Dockyard, working mostly fitting out S-class submarines, wireless offices, transmitting equipment, radar and ASDIC, boats such as HMS Satire, Sceptre, Strongbow, Seneschal, Sentinel, Sea Devil and many more. In 1941 I'd started playing local gigs on string bass. Later I started with Jackie Dunlop and my brother Jack in a Greenock band called Jackie Dunlop's Rhythm Boys. This would be early 1942. I worked regular with this band until 1946. I had by this time moved on to piano, and when Jimmy Cowie bought me my first trumpet at £6, I gradually moved on to trumpet. In November 1946, I received my calling up papers to join the Royal Air Force on the 9th of December. 3 weeks before this date, while having lunch in Russ's Dairies in Greenock with Archie Robertson, our drummer, 2 young ladies came in and sat at the next table. Archie, having played drums in the local theatre, the Greenock Empire, introduced me to the ladies. 2 of the dance troupe from the theatre. I was later to marry one of them, May Morrison. Incidentally, when I started work at 15, my wage weekly was 7 shillings and 6 with 4 pence off for insurance. On my 16th birthday, I got a rise of 4 pence, giving me 7 shillings and 10 pence with 4 pence off. That was old money, of course, and that was for a 47-hour week. 7 of us from Greenock area arrived at RAF Padgate on Sunday night, the 9th of December 1946, to be kitted out. On arrival at the camp gate, we were given a slice of sultana cake. This was our lot, little breakfast, if you could call a bowl of watery porridge breakfast. When we were kitted out, we were moved to RAF Burton Wood for a few days and then on to RAF Innsworth near Gloucester for initial training, or square bashing as it was better known. Halfway through the 8 weeks training, the camp ran out of fuel for the cook and sent home for an indefinite period. The day I arrived home, local band leader and trumpet player Charlie Harkin took ill and I was asked to deputise for him on trumpet at Craigburn Pavilion, Gourock. This lasted for the 8 weeks I was at home, and when I was recalled to RAF Innsworth, Charlie was okay to play again. When we finished training, I was sent to RAF Wotton, Norfolk for the summer of 1947, then on to the electrical course at RAF Melksham in Wiltshire, where I arrived. I was invited to join the band. I played in both the military band and the dance bands, where I learned to read music properly. When I passed out of the electrical course, I was now officially an electrician Group 2 and was given a job in the station workshops. But my main job was musician. I was kept on at RAF Melksham till I was demobbed in July 1948. I came home to a job in Craigburn Pavilion with Henry Morrison's Swing Stars in September 1948 and stayed with Henry till the job finished in the late 60s. We played for dancing the whole year round, and in the summer months we played for a summer show for 13 weeks. We would play for the show from 7 o'clock till 9 o'clock, have a half-hour break, and then play for dancing till 1 o'clock. In summer 1951, as usual, the summer show started in July. This time, the dancers were May Moxon's Young Ladies. The girls were Rose Holbein, May York, Mary Raphael, and Mary Morrison, who I already met in 1946. We fell in love straight away and married on the 6th of November 1954. Mary turned out to be the best-looking, cleverest woman I've ever known. She could turn her hand to any job: knitting, crochet, cooking, and she was a beautiful dancer: tap, Highland, and Irish, and ballet. My favourite was to watch her dance the Sheen Trews. We were married in Old Carntine Church on Saturday the 6th of November 1954 at 5 o'clock. The reception was in the Georgic Restaurant in Union Street, Glasgow. On the Sunday morning, we drove with my sister, Molly, Bill and family down to London for our honeymoon. Halfway through our honeymoon, we had to get a bus to Manchester for a dance band championship in Bellevue, which we didn't win, of course, then back down to London for the rest of our honeymoon. The weather down there was miserable, cold, foggy and wet. We used to think of our honeymoon as the following summer. We'd bought an old car and we had an old tent. We drove down the Ayrshire coast to Carlisle, down through the Mersey Tunnel to North Wales and on as far as Carnarvon. We had a marvellous holiday. Marissa was born 1 month later on the 18th of October. We lived with my mother and father, Jack and Jimmy Cowie, in Glencairn, Glasgow, Whiteford, Glasgow. Jimmy had stayed with us since before the war. The following year we were given a house in Houston Street, Port Glasgow, 1 room and kitchen with an inside toilet. We thought it was marvellous. Heather was born on the 1st of December 1956 at that address. I was at this time working as an electrician in Scott's Scarpsburn Dockyard during the day and Craigburn Pavilion, Gourock, at nights as a musician. Mary's first job when we were married was a bookkeeping job in a big furniture store in Greenock, then as a bar lady at the Glen Falls, Port Glasgow. She then started work with Playtex in the bra factory and also in the girdle factory, then in Blacks on the tents. My mother and Mary bought a new Singer sewing machine between them. She had a few lessons and then became an expert dressmaker. She could turn out beautiful dresses for my mother, herself and the girls. The following summer I worked on, but took Mary on to Eyemouth with the girls to stay for a holiday with her mother for 2 weeks. Her father cooked for the Boys' Brigade. He had been a sergeant cook in the army during the war. When they came home from Eyemouth, Mary said she'd never go on holiday without me again, and she didn't. We always went together after that. The week before Heather was born, I was paid off when the ship I was working on was completed. I vowed never to go back to working at shipyards again. Mary and I, with Marisa and Heather, moved back to Glencairn, the 11-roomed house with 1.5 acres of ground. We took over upstairs, and my mother and father lived downstairs, although they were more often upstairs with us. Mary worked on up in the factories, where I, with my father's assistance, built chicken houses and fenced off the garden. We produced free-range eggs. We already had a large greenhouse and a small one. I grew tomatoes, lettuce and flowers. Mary delivered the produce to the ladies who worked with her. The fresh eggs, chickens, tomatoes and cut flowers, etc. were in great demand there. Scottish television started up in 1959. The musical director was Geraldo, a very well-known London band leader. My brother Jack and I played a lot of sessions there until Geraldo handed the baton over to George Keenan, who Jack and I had worked with before in summer shows. Over the years we accompanied the present-day artists such as Jackson 5, when Michael Jackson was only a wee boy then, Bruce Forsyth, Matt Monro, David Soul from Starsky and Hutch. That was a command performance for Queen Elizabeth. Lulu, Dana, Buddy Greco, Roy Castle, Brenda Lee, Glenn Daly, Charlie Chester, and a great many more. I worked then for BBC Television and Radio, Scottish Television, Radio Clyde. I worked in the Majestic Ballroom, Locarno Ballroom, Denison Pally, Barrowland Ballroom, Flamingo Ballroom, Plaza Ballroom, the Rangers Club at Ibrox, and the Darling Hotel down in Ayr. A lot of these were for dancing, and some were for, it was cabaret we accompanied. In 1955, Mary and I bought a 5-year-old butcher's van, a 1950 Austin Devon A40. We cut windows in the side and fitted a bench seat. Mary made tartan curtains for the windows, and we hand painted the van. No matter how many coats we gave the side panels, you could still read Butcher and Flesher. In summer 1959 we made our first big attempt at a holiday to painting in Devon with our van, a Thomas Black's ridge tent. We took my mother, who stayed with her sister in painting when we got there. Also, of course, Marisa and Heather. We got beautiful weather and had a great time. We had a few holidays after that in painting. Next, while Mary was working for Blacks making tents, she bought a new big frame tent. We then started going camping to Isle of Wight. Every year we seemed to take more gear until we decided to buy a camping trailer. I started work with the Ministry of Defence, Navy, at a depot in Laird Street, Greenock, as an electrical fitter, overhauling ship's spare gear until the depot closed in 1970. Summer 1970, we took our car, tent, etc. over to France. We drove through France into Spain and camped outside Barcelona. By this time, we had added to the family, Karen in 1965 and Willie in 1967. In 1971, we took our first brand new car, a red Beetle, across to Ostend and drove down to the Black Forest camping, into Austria and Switzerland. The following year we crossed from Southampton to Santander and drove down through Spain to Tarragona. When the machinery depot closed in 1970, I transferred to yard services, an outstation from Rosyth Dockyard, and based at Great Harbour, Greenock. Until 1980, I worked at Navy Buildings, Greenock, maintaining an 8-position PMBX telephone switchboard, also a 4-ton Coles mobile electric crane, 2 electric forklift trucks and 2 electric flat trucks. I continued working with yard services until I retired in November 1989. I was a technical supervisor when I retired and had served from August 1961, completing 28 years, and I was presented with the Imperial Services Medal. The following year, 1973, I think, we decided to try boating on the Norfolk Broads. We enjoyed this so much that the following few years we went back. We had been odd winter weeks to mainland Spain, but next we discovered Tenerife. Puerto de la Cruz was our very favourites. We often took a winter break there and often went in May. In September 1980, Mary booked a caravan for the holiday weekend at Jeancroft Caravan Park between Turnberry and Girvan. She liked the site so much that she bought a caravan from a building site in Shettleston, Glasgow, one of 4 caravans used to house families while their house was being refurbished. Our caravan was only 1 year old, but when we got it transported down to Girvan, we scrubbed it inside and outside, Mary, Karen, Willie and I. It was all electric, so we removed the water heater, electric cooker, etc., and I installed gas fire and gas cooker. We loved our caravan and went down every chance we had year after year. Mary was a play leader working with the mentally handicapped at this time. She took them for a night out during the summer of 1989 to Sundrum Castle near Ayr, where Heather was appearing in cabaret for the summer. Mary came home very ill, couldn't breathe. I called in the doctor, who diagnosed pleurisy. From then on, she had frequent spells of chest complaints from emphysema and chronic bronchitis. In January 1998, she contracted pneumonia. She had only been retired since 1990. She got a lot better by April with the treatment she received from Inverclyde Royal, so I booked a holiday in Jersey starting on the 2nd of May, but she took ill on the 27th of April, was taken to hospital on the 28th and died on Thursday, the 30th of April 1998. A good part of me died with her, I can assure you. We had such a happy life together. If I was asked what would I change if I had a second chance, I'd say, when I was introduced to Mary Morrison in Ross's Dairies in December 1945, before going to the RAF, I'd ask her if I could write to her. Then we might know each other well enough to go about together when I was demobbed in July 1948. We might well have a few more years married life together that way. Anywhere I'd like to go before I go. I always wanted to see the West Highland line to Mallaig. Also, I'd like to visit my father and mother's grave in St Clement's Churchyard in Rodel, South Harris. Brother Jack told me years ago to ask at Leverborough Post Office for directions. I'll maybe manage it yet.